Dialed In Angling podcast presented by Strike Master Augers and OnX Fish. Welcome back to the podcast. We are on the shores of the Rainy River. This is a trip that I love making almost every single year, making the journey up here, fishing the Rainy River when it's conducive. You know, some years when there's a ton of snow, a ton of rain, a ton of runoff, the rivers blow out, the river gets dirty. It's no good. Last year was probably the best year as far as consistency is concerned, as far as the bite. All I heard about was the Rainy River, the Rainy River, the Rainy River. Guess what? My boat was not ready last year. This is sort of the case this year. My guest this week, Nick Cekalla. He's no stranger to Dialed In Angling. He's a good buddy of mine and has been on the podcast many times. Nick, welcome to the podcast again.
Yeah, good to be here again. And in typical Rainy River fashion, we had snow, wind, rain, cold weather, but it was so good to be back on the boat.
It was. Feeling that thump of the walleye. We will talk about the bite in depth. And also typical of the Rainy River bite, I still don't have my boat. I was waiting. I ran batteries. I was down in the cities this week grabbing batteries from FVP, dropping batteries off at Rapid Marine. They're rigging the boat as quick as possible. I can't wait to kick off open water and to kick off summer. I was out in Green Bay earlier this week. I'll talk a little bit about that. Not a whole lot to talk about there just because the bite was slow there. You know, we had such a warm March that it seemed like things were really progressing quickly. And then all of a sudden, it's been cold, man. It's been very cold. It's like almost like we're in a holding pattern. I know lakes are out around the Twin Cities, but as far as up by me and over by where you live, north of Brainerd, everything's still locked up. Even driving here, you know, you could ice fish on a lot of lakes around Winnie, that's for sure. There's a ton of snow. I mean, it's like a winter wonderland still. Yeah,
we got a little tease there, I feel like, early, and everyone thought spring was here, but it's definitely been in a holding pattern and holding on way too long. I'm ready for it to be gone. But, we went and picked up my boat from a buddy of mine. He bought it from him, and we just got it this morning. And it was just kind of that first time out, hustle and bustle, trying to figure out all the stuff you need to get in your boat and ready for the year. And I'm glad to get it kicked off because felt so good to be back in the boat.
You know, to be in the boat is like riding a bike. You know, once you get on that trolling motor, we had the forward-facing sonars going. You were up on the trolling motor. Jake and I were in the back. We got Jake, Nick's buddy, and my buddy here as well. Jake got the biggest fish. He doesn't want to be on the podcast, but he got the biggest fish with us. But no, just to get on those live scopes and to be shining fish again and casting, we quickly found out that, as far as if you're coming up to Rainy River in the next few days, the water's cold, right? It's 36 degrees. So pitching on fish and ripping and snapping and being aggressive is sort of out. We figured out you got to throw it out there and drag. It's a drag bite. And we've seen that before on Rainy. We've seen it in cold water walleye situations. I was just out in Green Bay. It was the ultra of slow moving bites. You couldn't snap it. The first thing I want to do when I grab a rod and a jig, let it hit the bottom and snap that bait. I mean, it's just sort of like, it feels good, right? Especially you see them on a live scope or on forward-facing sonar. You want to cast to those fish and snap that bait.
You're excited. Let's go. You're working way too fast. Want them to just crush it. And it's cold water fishing, man.
Yeah,
it's just how dragging. It is,
So what we did is a lot of what worked the best for us as far as when we got our bites. For sure, it was like throwing it out behind the boat, working up current very, very slow and dragging that bait. And I fished a paddle tail all day. I know you switch back and forth between hair and plastics and even minnows because we stayed on the Minnesota side. So, Nick was fishing some minnows. Jake's fished some minnows. I stuck with the paddle tail. I used the Largo shad all day on a sleek jig. But definitely in that shallower water, we were using 1/4 ounce jigs. As soon as we got out a little bit deeper, we upsized our jigs to 3/8, even half, and we were catching way more fish and continually staying in that slow pattern and just dragging it. And, some of the fish were thumping it. It was like you'd get a few that would just grab onto it, but some would actually thump that bait. And For me, summer has arrived, or open water season has arrived, when I feel the clunk of a walleye hitting a jig. There's nothing better in my mind than the feel of that. I know some people would say, it's, spring crappie fishing or wherever they start their season. I definitely am looking forward to a bobber going down for crappies, but there's nothing better than the feel of a walleye clunking a jig. I was talking with Travis Frank last week, and he was sort of rubbing it in, and the fact that, he had been out on the Mississippi River, fishing pool 2, pool 3, 4, whatever it was, and catching a bunch of walleyes on the river. And I was super jealous because I hadn't been out at that point. And, that was his talk too. It was like the first feel of the jig crack. He was like all in, he's back into summer fishing just like that.
Yeah. Nothing better than that feeling. And that's it seems like ever since I really got into walleye fishing and stuff, Rainy River has always been my spot I go to get it kicked off. It's just like the kickoff for the year for me. And then I love going down to Red Wing and all, the Mississippi, don't get me wrong, but it's like Rainy River, that trip it's time to start getting the boat ready, the rods ready, the tackle ready. Summer's coming, fishing openers coming. Let's go.
Yeah, me too. I love coming up to Rainy. Every year, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, is dramatically different. I've had years where it's super cold. Like today, we were out there today. Nick wasn't kidding. I mean, it snowed pretty much all day today. I was really grateful that it wasn't rain because, it was snowing hard, blowing. I've had times where we've been up here and it's super warm and enjoyable, 60 degrees, the sun shining. And then the next day you wake up and there's 2 to 3 inches of snow in your boat and it's a high of 19. I remember fishing with my Uncle Gary one time, and I think we stayed at Wigwam with Tommy Briggs. And the day before it was like 70 degrees. We were hot. It was just roasting in a sweatshirt. It was like the most ideal Rainy River fishing you could do as far as temperature, the bite, everything. The next day we had woke up and it was literally like 9 degrees. We got out there, it was a high of like 19. The wind was blowing out of the northwest off that ice sheet off of Lake of the Woods. And, it was like our attitude and everything, the wind had been sucked out of the sail. It went from summer to winter within a matter of 24 hours. And I've had it the opposite. I've been up here a lot, not only walleye fishing, but sturgeon fishing as well. And we've had days where it's been super, super cold. And then that sun comes out this time of year and it's like turning on the furnace, right? That sun has so much power that even if you get a day where it's in the 40s or lower 50s, that sun comes out and man, it feels like a heat wave, and the fish can feel that. You see the mood of those fish change throughout the day. I've had it where in the morning the bite's super slow, cold, you're dragging, it's slow. And by the afternoon, there's fish everywhere. They're snapping. We were talking about it in the boat. I remember times where you spot lock in the current and it's nonstop, one after another, like at every cast. I can't imagine what it looks like down there as far as the fish coming through. Now with forward-facing sonar, we can see that, and you couldn't see it in the past. But I would like to just see it with my own eyes. Can you imagine the, millions of walleyes that are coming up that river all at once and, all doing their thing? It's kind of cool. It's like a great migration.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, you went out to Green Bay. That's another hot spot, but you got, out South Dakota is kind of a hot spot early in the early on. And then you got Green Bay, like I said, Fox River, and then Rainy River, and I'd say maybe Red Wing. Those are kind of like the hot destinations, early season before the actual opener for Minnesota or Wisconsin or whatever for inland lakes. But yeah, Rainy River has just always been one that I love to go to just because it is, I don't know. I just love the up north feel, and the small water in the river. And I just love it up here.
I do too. I've always loved Lake of the Woods. I guided in college up in the Northwest Angle. I've always loved Lake of the Woods as far as just a fishery that it is. The big fish potential is always there. There's always a ton of walleyes. They call it the walleye capital of the world for a reason because it is one of the premier destinations in the country, really. And in Canada, I mean, the Canadians love it just as well. You know, the Canadian side of Lake of the Woods is super fun to fish. I like the Rainy River just because it's sort of like just one of those check marks that I like to make throughout the year. I always talk about in the, you know, kind of going through the seasons, you know, in the spring, hitting spring fishing, Green Bay, Rainy, you know, different destinations before the opener, crappie fishing. I love that spring crappie bite. And then boom, you get into summer, Mille Lacs, Leech, Winnie, like all the places that we love guiding, all the places we love fishing, those type of bites. And then all of a sudden the smallmouth start to turn on Mille Lacs, like all these bites that occur throughout the year. I love to check off those boxes, and the Rainy River is at the top of my list of that. Let's talk a little about Green Bay. I probably had the toughest bite. Well, not probably, the toughest bite I've ever had out in Green Bay. And I think it was largely caused or due to the fact that we're in this holding pattern. The fish out in Green Bay, same thing. There was like not big pods of them. It was like throwing on little 3 and 4 packs, which normally when you're driving out in the bay and you're looking for fish on side imaging or forward facing sonar, you're throwing ripping wraps or hair jigs on these, or plastics too, on these pods of walleyes, these big pods of walleyes that are coming in to spawn. And I specifically like going out to Green Bay early in April. I love hitting those pre-spawners. It's always such a gamble because it's either boom or bust, right? Those pre-spawners, you might not get that many in a day, but you got a shot at getting a 12-pounder. I mean, the legit shot of catching a big walleye on Green Bay every time you go out there, but it's a timing thing. You have to hit it perfectly. And I've had it where I've hit it nail on the head, right? You hit the nail on the head and we've smoked them. I've had it where I just missed the bite window in the sense where all the pre-spawners came in. They were like, you got to get out here. I drove out there. It warmed up in the 70s. They went up and spawned. All we could catch were males. But then 2 days later, it was like all these post spawners coming out of the rivers and stuff. But I think the biggest factor of these fish not biting when I was there is Lake Michigan is down like 3 feet right now. And so everything, it was weird. There wasn't any current flowing really. I mean, I fished. So Green Bay is a huge area, right? You can fish Green Bay. You can fish Sturgeon Bay, which is on the other side of Green Bay. So it's like east or west. We're on the west side. Basically, if you drew a line through like Peshtigo River and fished all the way down south of Ocano. And that's the stretch we fished. There were some guys doing good in the Fox River. I wouldn't say good, but they were catching fish in the Fox River. But even the guides, when we were out there during that time window, a struggle. But it's a timing thing, right? You could go out there 2 days later. Like I've had tons of people ask me, how's Green Bay? Well, it's tough when we were there. But 2-3 days later, like now it looks like this weekend and into next week, it's going to warm up, right? So I sort of have that in the back of my mind right now that if my boat gets done and Green Bay starts firing, I'm going back out there because of that big fish potential. Green Bay is sort of like Rainy in the sense where you can't always put a date on the calendar. Like if you got a bunch of buddies and you want to come up to the Rainy River here or go to Green Bay, you can't always just say, okay, well, we're going to go April 7th weekend. It could be hit or miss. But that's any bite window in the spring, right? That's any temperature swing. I would have never expected that we were still this cold in surface temperature. Today, if we're going to give like a fishing report on Rainy, we dumped in and we ran both directions of the river, right? We ran up to Frontier, kind of went up that direction. Then we went all the way down. We kind of wanted to explore. We drove through Baudette and made it to, I was surprised we actually made it as far as we did. We didn't quite make it to the resorts, but it's not all the way to Adrian's. And I would say last week at this time when it was 60 degrees every day, I thought for sure it'd be out to almost 4 Mile Bay. Didn't you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And springtime is such, like you hit, it's all about timing. When are them fish going to do their thing, get up, spawn, and it all has to do with temperatures and moon phases and all that. But let's talk about timing on another thing. looking down in the cities, they're already starting to, their lakes are open. They're already starting to get into some crappie fishing.
Crappie fishing and the river, from what I hear. I haven't been down on the Mississippi River at all this year. I'm not a huge, Mississippi Pool 3, 4. I get down there a few times with our buddies like Mitch Hackmuller, or even a few of my other friends, Matt, Matt Ernst. He's a big river guy. I go down there with him. I didn't grow up fishing down there. It's fun. I've had some really phenomenal fishing down there. I didn't grow up fishing down there. So I always wait to see when the rainy goes out. I would rather come up here than drive down there. But a lot of times that goes out way before here. So that bite starts, in early March, right? But what I've heard from anglers down there is fish are already getting to be post spawn down there, which is weird to me. But it's that's kind of how it's been. Last week on the podcast, Travis and I talked about how different it is from the southern part of the state to the northern part of the state just in the last few weeks. I mean, last week I saw temperatures in the Twin Cities were in the 70s. Down in southern Minnesota, we're in the 80s. We never got out of the 30s. I remember seeing Facebook posts and Snapchats from people fishing Red Wing, and it was 75 degrees. At my house, it was sleeting and 34 degrees where I live, up by Moose Lake. So, there's been this real stark contrast as far as temperatures. And I really thought last week when we planned, because before I went out to Green Bay, Nick and I and Jake have been talking, hey, let's try to hit rainy next week. And it looked like timing was going to be perfect. And it's not bad. We sort of had to figure them out today. If I had to base the bite today, I would say it was not bad. For the first time me hitting the water, other than the debacle out in Green Bay, first time hitting the Rainy River and just kind of figuring them out, what they're doing, what they're biting on, where they're at in the stretch of river where you're finding the most concentrations of fish. We did pretty good. I mean, we covered a lot of water today, from where we started, where we ran upriver to where we ended up downriver. We covered a pretty good stretch, and we checked a lot of water. And that's what's cool about having a modern electronics of side imaging, forward-facing sonar. You don't have to stop and fish these spots anymore. You can just pull in and scan. And I would say if I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, it was definitely sweet to be on the water, but I would say in that 6, 7 range, for the first day being up. I think tomorrow, as far as numbers are concerned, because at the end of the day, we were definitely whacking them consistently. That was fun. We were getting them dragging. Like we said early in the podcast, the dragging bite is definitely the thing. If you're coming up this weekend, plan on dragging, and it might change. It's going to warm up a little bit, but I don't think it's going to warm up that much. There's a lot of ice out there. We were dodging icebergs all over the place. The water's 36 degrees. So, it's going to warm up a little bit, probably Friday, Saturday. Then it looks like Sunday is going to start dropping off, and then that's it, right? So plan on dragging. When we got into the dragging technique, and we talked to our buddies, and they said dragging, and I guess we were kind of being a little bit stubborn to start, wouldn't you say?
For sure.
I mean, we were pitching at fish, and we got a few small ones, but once we started dragging, the quality got better. Jake got a really nice fish. We started seeing consistently bigger fish, and just in that area where we found them, I would say there was more bigger fish there than any other spots we checked. When we were in some of those spots earlier in the day, it seemed like there was a ton of small walleyes.
Yeah. And I think part of that has to do is we were working our way towards the lake. And obviously a majority of these fish are coming from the lake. And the further you get east on the river, you can run into a lot more resident fish that live there year round. So getting towards the lake, you might get some of them more of the migrators and some of the bigger fish. So the other thing we really noticed today were the fish were very spread out. They weren't huge packs of fish. That big push, I don't think, has happened yet. So, I mean, there was a lot more of those 4 or 5 packs of fish. And when you found them fish, they seemed to cooperate pretty well. It's just not, we just weren't running into packs of 40, 50, hundreds of walleyes like what will be happening here in the next week or so, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, for the amount of fish we saw, we caught them pretty good. Mm-hmm. I thought. I mean, like Nick said, we weren't seeing packs of 50 to 100 like I, was hoping to see on the Rainy. It was more like 4 and 5 packs, twos and threes. And it seemed like it was smaller packs, but they were very frequent. We saw them on the graph or the forward-facing sonar. I'd see them on side imaging, and then, Nick was running a forward-facing sonar up front on the trolling motor. I was running one on a pole. Jake and I were in the back kind of dragging. And boom, as soon as we saw the frequency where it was like, oh, there's two over here, there's one over there, then we started catching them.
Yep.
The other thing, it always amazes me when you have ice on the river, like consistent ice flows like that, how many fish are underneath the ice? I see that in Green Bay all the time. That's not just a freak deal that happens every once in a while. I see it all the time where you got pack ice like that. We've had it in Green Bay where we're trying to skip our ripping wraps underneath that ice flow. That's no different than out here on the river. It was very apparent. We were trying to chuck our jigs and plastics in between some of those icebergs, letting them fall down and then dragging them underneath. That's kind of fun to do. We caught some fish doing it today as well.
Yeah, probably the same thing, like along the lines of fishing against a heave or a ice crack. They're probably just using it as shade or that light penetration difference. It's just something different down there.
What amazes me, though, is like Green Bay, it can be really clear, but like this year it was stained. The Rainy River is stained, dirty, You'd think in a clear body, it would make sense like on a lake like Mille Lacs, right? Sure. Or Winnie, where it's gin clear, or Leech, Leech has been getting more and more clear. But on these stained bodies of water, they still relate to that. Red Lake is a prime example of how they use those heaves, those big mounds, the crappies, the walleyes, everything. I mean, when you and I and Jake were chasing crappies, up and down the roads and all over Red Lake, how many walleyes did you find that were along those roads or whatever? You know what I mean? Like perch schools that were using that area.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence. We've just seen it so many times over and over again. That light penetration is just such a huge thing to hold fish.
Yeah, definitely. I was amazed how many times where I wanted to cast and like, oh, there's a huge ice chunk there.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it just happened over and over and over. Let's get into exact details before we move on. I want to talk a little more about spring crappie fishing. You started alluding to it in the Twin Cities. I'm seeing lots of posts of that, but let's just talk specifics. We started out, I was using a 1/4 ounce sleek jig, orange head, orange fire, UV, kind of a white bottom. And then I was using like a 3-inch paddle tail, a Largo shad in particular. I was switching back and forth between the gizzard shad, the white, the albino. I never left that all day. I kind of stayed in that same pattern. However, when we got out a little deeper, we definitely needed to shift into some bigger jig heads. We got way more bites. When we got below 17 feet, I would say the majority of the fish that we caught were on 3/8 half-ounce jig heads. I continue to use that sleek jig. I upsized my paddle tail. I went to a 3.5-inch Largo. Even a 4-inch I think would work. I like that bigger profile. I always feel like big baits, big fish. I mean, I know that doesn't always correlate, but I always feel like that, especially in deep water. I don't know what your thoughts are, but I know you started out with the hair jig. You fished a hair jig a lot. And same thing, yep. You made that comment in the boat. You're like, because I said, hey, you're going to use just a live minnow and a jig head. And you're like, no, I want the bulkiness of that hair.
Yeah. And one thing we really running into lately is the bait situation. We're not able to find big minnows. So, I mean, ideally a guy would love to have, nice big rainbows or small suckers or something like that up here. Fatheads are about all you can get. So what we were doing to combat that is, I was using the bucktail jig, and I found the purple and with the white hair on there. I'm not sure the exact name of the color, but that purple and white bucktail jig, and then just tipping it with that fat.
It's like the Vikings. I always call it the
Vikings jig. Yeah, exactly.
It's white. It's got chartreuse, and then it's got purple.
Exactly. Yeah, the Viking bucktail. Yeah, with the fat head, and all that was doing was just bulking up my presentation, showing them something bigger, just because it helps with the fall rate as well. But if you're dragging, it doesn't really, maybe gives a little bit more flotation. But
I think it does. I think that hair is so lifelike in that current.
Yep.
You can't even mimic it with plastic sometimes. Sometimes they just want that hair. Mm-hmm. And when you're using, we only had fat heads, and when you have those small profile minnows, it seems like having that hair on there just comes alive in the current.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was kind of stubborn. I stuck with it all day and it was working well. I did throw a little bit of plastics as well, which worked, a little bit better. It seemed in the afternoon when they fired up a little bit more, but I stuck to that hair most of the day with that fat head. But yeah.
Onyx Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Download the app today to get fisheries informations in the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin, along with research tools for serious anglers and beginners alike. Filter lakes by species, trophy only, keeper fish, abundance, or all of the above. Plan which lakes to fish with the app, navigate to the accesses, and once you're there, use the OnX best-in-class weather imagery and fishing hotspots to catch more fish. OnX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you would never known existed. OnX Fish, the app that is changing the game on ice.
Yeah, I'm even tomorrow I want to experiment some more with plastics. I wouldn't say I was stubborn because I tried different plastics as far as size and heads. I didn't go crazy and try the whole gamut of colors, but I tried different, and I sort of stuck with the paddle tails. Tomorrow, I would like to experiment a little bit, just for my own knowledge. I want to try some Crush City baits. I want to try something, even with a straight tail or
Mooch minnow or
like a mooch minnow or something like that. Because I like that paddle tail in the current. It gives off a lot of vibration, even if you're dragging it. It gives it that. But I want to see what some of those other baits do. I want to be able to watch them on the live scope. Just experiment a little more. Day 2, when we can get on the fish quicker, we kind of know where we want to start tomorrow. We know the depth ranges of the fish that were the most consistent for us. We know the presentation that we're going to do. And once you get that stuff sort of dialed in, then for me, it comes to down experimentation of different style plastics. And I love throwing all sorts of different plastics. And, I want to experiment with that a little bit. I also want to, hopefully we can get into some of those pods like we saw this afternoon where you could tell they were better fish just on forward facing sonar. You could see the size, where this morning I'd say the numbers were probably better as far as what we were seeing put together. But man, a lot of little rats and small, males, some saugers, mixed in. We saw a lot of people catching them, but it seemed like they were spot locked out in that deep water, almost vertical jigging. And a lot of those people that were setting the hook a lot, it seemed like they were a lot of small saugers.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
I'm not super interested in catching small saugers tomorrow. I'd rather, put on a bigger profile plastic and like a freeloader. I want to see what that freeloader does in the wind. It's sort of got the ribs along the edge of that thing, and that tail moves so much that I think I'm going to start with what I have tied on today. But then as we get towards the afternoon bite, if we hit a bite like we did today, where there's lots of big fish sort of stacked up along those areas, I really want to throw that freeloader. If you're unfamiliar, Crush City is another plastic that Rapala makes, super popular among bass anglers. Walleye anglers are really starting to gravitate towards it. They have, the paddle tails, the heavy hitters. They have a mooch minnow, which is a different tailed plastic on there, sort of a swimming minnow. And then the freeloader, super popular among bass anglers. I started using them last year for walleyes and just teeing off on them, right? So I have total confidence in those plastics. It's really added to the arsenal of plastics that I use because they're so lifelike, they're durable, they have that super elastic, profile to them. Everything about those baits just screams fish. I catch everything on them. Huge believer in the Crush Cities. And I just want to experiment a little more tomorrow on the Rainy River and cold water, because these fish up here, sometimes I always think in my mind, like I fish more fork tails and that sort of thing when the water temperature rises. Mm-hmm. But when you're dragging like this, that's different.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. In the springtime in that cold water, the best plastics are going to be the ones that you don't have to move as much and get the most amount of, action out of that bait, because they don't want to chase them that hard. The water's 36 degrees. I mean, you can snap them a little bit, but the least amount you move that bait and get the most action you can out of that plastic are the ones you want to gravitate to in this cold water.
Well, and that's Crush City in a nutshell.
Exactly.
And that's why that Largo shad that has so much action to that paddle tail, when we're dragging it, I could feel that bait vibrating and thumping. So that's why they're striking it. And that's why that's usually my go-to paddle tail. But you hit the nail on the head. That Crush City, it has so much action without moving it. And that's why I also like hair jigs. You don't have to do anything to a hair jig, and it's moving, right? That hair is just undulating and moving. That's why I'm a fan of hair jigs as well. So if you're looking at baits to bring up here to drag, I would definitely throw those in the boat. But also, I will say one little tip for if you're fishing the bottom with Crush City, it has a little bit more buoyancy to it than your other plastics. So you're definitely going to want to upsize your jig head. Going to that 3/8 or half ounce jig head versus your 1/8 or 1/4 ounce. The buoyancy of that bait is much better than your other plastics. And so because of that, you're going to want to weight that down a little bit in the current, especially as we're using this presentation, where we're just dragging. And so, pointing that trolling motor up the current, throwing it out behind the boat, or we did throw on fish and then just let it drop back and sort of drag, and it's more of a drag. It's not the pop. And even as much as I want to jig that, and I do add a little bit of action to that bait, it's so hard for me just to drag and not to pop that bait. But if you can be patient, you get your strikes. And some of them are big strikes. I did have a few where I popped it and they cracked it, but most of the time I was just holding it there. I had jigged it. When I was jigging it, they weren't hitting it. As soon as I just held it there, all of a sudden, wham, I had a few just absolutely tee off on that. And almost every fish I caught today was inhaled. That whole paddle tail, that 3.5 to 4 inch bait was completely down its gullet. I didn't have to dig it out of its stomach or anything, but I didn't have any baits on the outside of the mouth. And I think everybody, including Jake, most of them were in the mouth. They weren't like they hit it and you have to wait and wait and wait for them to take that second bite. Most of them, it was like, boom, they were on.
Yeah, no, for sure. So what's next on your agenda here? What are you going to do after Rainy Until opener?
Well, even on the way up here, you were talking to some people in the Twin Cities. The ice still isn't out around home. I'm guessing if it warms up this weekend, that ice shape's going to start moving around on the lakes by my house, all around Brainerd, Aiken. It's got to go out soon, right? I'm dying. But I want to get out crappie fishing. And if it means for me to drive down and fish around the Twin Cities, I know you kind of alluded to it earlier. We have some friends that have been out fishing around the Twin Cities. I know some people that have been on Lake Minnetonka. I didn't grow up fishing Lake Minnetonka. I didn't fish Lake Minnetonka until a few years ago when you and I were out there together. What a cool body of water. You have all these harbors everywhere. These fish come up into the shallows. There's just like endless water to fish around that area, right? With all the channels and all the cool backwaters. If we don't get ice out pretty soon and things start to warm up, I would love to go down there. Not on the weekend, but I want to go during the week. We have some buddies that live around that area. They have boats. Our buddy Hammer has a boat. A few of my other friends have boats down there. So, I've already been hitting them up like, hey, if we don't have ice out next week, I might come down and crappie fish with you before Easter. I know their surface temps are going to be pretty darn warm, right? If it warms up here, because they're looking at ice out almost 2 weeks ago now. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be opposed to going down there and trying it. I loved fishing those harbors. I really did. Watching the bobber go down. But now with forward-facing sonar, I want to go up in there and just explore. Even if I'm in their boat or if I don't have my own boat, going back into those channels and just exploring is super cool. I mean, it's a Lake Minnetonka is pretty neat. I have to say it's, for being close to the Twin Cities, it's pretty darn good fishing.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's funny. First time I went down, there was a few years ago. We fished a little crappie tournament for a benefit for a buddy of ours, but I have to admit, I got lost that day on that lake. You give us all the different harbors and back channels, and I was going one way around that big island. I had to stop and look at my map to see where I was going. There's just so many endless areas where crappies can be out there, and I'm no expert to the lake. Like I said, I was on it one time ever, but I know that I've seen a lot of great fishing come out of that lake, and I'm just blown away this year at the, like we touched on earlier. There's a cutoff somewhere. It's got to be like that, maybe Zimmerman and South, where, and I don't know if it's because we got more snow that held onto the ice or what it was, but we have a ton of ice left, and theirs is just completely out. I mean, I'm thinking it's going to be another maybe week and a half, 2 weeks for we're seeing open water.
I actually think there's two different layers in the state. I think you're right about Princeton, Zimmerman, somewhere in there and south. Yeah. The lakes are out. You could fish. You get north of there, and maybe it's probably moved north over the last few days, but and into the weekend with it warming up. But then you get up by our houses and there's still ice on the lake, but probably not fishable fishing ice. I don't know that I'd walk around the ice around my house right now. It's eroded out from the shoreline enough where I wouldn't feel safe. But then the next layer of that is north of Leech Lake, like Cass Lake, Winnie, up towards Squaw Lake, Bowstring. People are ice fishing still. And I'm seeing lots of Facebook posts, but also as we drove up, you could see people had been drilling holes the day before on a few of the lakes we drove by. And so there's two layers. And I think up here, yes, there was a snow band. Even down towards us, there's been some snow. But also it's temperature changes so dramatic, I mean, obviously last week when it was in the 80s in southern Minnesota and we had the 30s, I mean, that was apparent. But that it's been like that a lot as far as weather where, I just know talking to buddies, they're it's 60 degrees down in the cities right now. I'm 60, it's 33 at my, it's pretty dramatic. And so I think some of these lakes in this northern tier, if we don't get some real dramatic weather warm-ups quickly, they might be dealing with ice around opener. That's a true thing. I mean, I know opener's not till May 9th, 10th, but boy, I mean, it is literally getting to be around the 10th of April, 11th, 12th of April. I think the ice will be out in time for opener. I really do up here, but I know people that are ice fishing up here this weekend, north of Winnie, and I caution people, if you're going to go ice fishing in northern Minnesota, make sure that you know what lake you're on. You're using spud bars, float suits, picks. I don't really recommend anybody ice fishing, but I do know people that are going out this weekend north of Lake Winnebagosh, and they're walking out, and he's like, I could probably still take wheelers out. He said it's that good. It hasn't eroded from the shoreline. He said last week when they were ice fishing, there was almost 20 inches of ice still. And even just seeing this ice flow on Rainy, I mean, some of that ice we were going by was thick, and that's river ice.
I had a friend over in the Hibbing area last weekend, so and the temps we didn't burn any ice up since then, and he had 33 inches of ice last weekend.
So I know for a fact, because my kids play sports in the Iron Range all the time. We play Hibbing, Chisholm, Cherry. We just played Cherry and baseball the other night. They had a ton of snow. They kept on getting snow, and there's sort of a band. If you drive through the Iron Range, the snow banks are enormous, even now still. So I don't disbelieve that. I was in Florida a couple of weeks ago, and we got back. I thought the ice would be unfishable, and it was. I mean, me and my son went out. We had a great time. There was tons of ice still. We're just not moving quickly as quick as we should. I feel like last spring was sort of like this, where we had this really warm March, and then April was cold and kind of crummy. However, we did, the ice was out earlier because we didn't have the ice like we do this year, right? This year we have way more ice than we did last year. So, the ice still went out in March because it was so nice. But had it been a normal year, I think it would have been kind of along the same lines of what we're seeing this year. What's cool about the Rainy River this year, though, is because we didn't have the snow and the runoff and that big push of water. The Rainy River can blow out. Like you get a year where you get a ton of snow and then a bunch of rain. Those rivers start blowing out. The Big Fork River starts blowing out. And this water turns into the Willy Wonka River and the fish just don't bite, right? Or it's just, you got to wait until 4 Mile Bay. It could be, there's several factors that can turn off that bite, but that's a big contributing factor. That river blows out on a year where we get a ton of snow and a ton of rain. So that's sort of our saving grace right now as far as this bite. I think by this weekend, you're definitely going to see an uptick in the bite, but I think the Rainy River bite, as far as the walleye run, is going to be after it closes. I think it's going to be into next week, maybe even around Easter when it's already closed. People that come up sturgeon fishing are going to see those great big pods of walleyes that we were seeking out this week. And still fun to be up here. We're having a blast. We caught a ton of fish. I'm not complaining. It can always be better, right? But it can always definitely be worse. Like we saw out in Green Bay, that was a tough bite. It's the toughest bite I've ever had. But I know how good it can be because I've had phenomenal fishing out there. So it's still on my radar out there. I want to get back out there. We have some buddies like Chris and some other guys that are out there this next week. If that turns on, I might bypass the Lake Minnetonka crappie fishing and go right out to Green Bay. So how about you? I know we saw Marcus Quam out on the river today. Marcus is a big contributor to Dialed In Angling, big supporter as far as fishing reports. We shot shows with him. He's buddies of ours. Marcus was talking about how great the fishing was out in Waugh Bay and in South Dakota. I know North Dakota's a little bit behind. They're kind of like northern Minnesota, but South Dakota, the ice is off. And that's another place that I love to go in the spring. I love fishing South Dakota. I'd love to be out there, next week. I was secretly trying to talk my wife into like going somewhere for Easter, but bringing the boat and celebrating Easter somewhere where it's warm, but also we could fish. And that South Dakota area is always intriguing to me because I haven't spent a ton of time other than the river and maybe Waugh Bay and of course Big Stone Travers on the border open. But other than that, I've never like fished those little sloughs and stuff open water like early like this, like before the season. I've fished them throughout the summer, but I've never gone out there like before the Minnesota walleye opener. And I've always wanted to do that.
I've never done that either. I have been out to like that Missouri River system, the Bismarck, the Wahi, early in the boat. And that's really starting to kick off. My friend Chad Schilling owns a Wahi Wings and Walleyes out there. And I've been seeing lots of posts that walleye bite's really been kicking off out there. Another thing that I kind of looking forward to after being in the boat today and seeing all them sturgeon down there on forward facing sonar. They were everywhere. And I'm going to get up here before opener and I'm going to actually get in the boat and do a little sturgeon fishing. And if people don't know, there is an actual a season where you can harvest these fish as well. And it's kind of weird if you've never done it. You actually get a tag, like almost like a deer tag, and you catch a fish in the slot that you can keep. And I don't remember exactly what the numbers are.
Yeah, it's always changing, but it's like 45 to 55.
And you actually tag that fish like a deer almost. So you get one, and you buy the tag. And most people smoke them or can them, but I don't keep them. But I know
or throw them back.
Yeah, or throw them back. I have a lot of friends that like smoking them or whatever. We just come up for fun and catch and release them. But and then crappie fishing, yeah. But to be honest, I think our good crappie fishing is going to be pushing towards Memorial Day weekend. The real.
I always hate that when because you and I guide, and when for me my guiding season starts that week of opener. I usually have some customers I take crappie fishing, and then boom, I'm right into guiding for the season. And It always bums me out when we have a late ice out year because I don't get to go crappie fishing like
when it's good, right?
and I love trying different lakes I maybe found in the winter that were a really good crappie bite, or just ones I do traditionally every single year. When we get a late ice out year, I don't get to do it. And so I'm really, really hoping that, the forecast sort of changes. It looks like this weekend's going to warm up. First part of next week's cold, and then it's going to warm up again around Easter. So, if it can go out like around Easter, that would still give me time to, these fish to move in the shallows, me time to get my boat, get out crappie fishing. Another thing that I like doing is shore fishing for crappies. I tell you all the time, I go ditch fishing. My uncle Gary, it's fun. It's like little roadside spots that the crappies and bluegills slide up into that are shallow water. It could be current. It could be just little backwater bays. Sometimes it's like there's public fishing piers that I know that are right on spots where you can get them really good in the spring. Whereas other times of year, those fish just aren't in there like that. I mean, I have shore spots where you can get legitimate 13 and 14 inch crappies, and you can catch 9 and 10 inch gills, because as soon as that water warms up, those fish slide in there, and it's super fun. Setting your cork, a foot and a half below the surface, using a small plastic, tungsten, whatever it is, and just catching those fish in 1 to 2 feet of water in these backwaters while you're standing on shore. I have spots where like it's right off a road. Like people drive by all the time and they know. A lot of people know about it. Are they in? Are the crappies biting? I'm usually not keeping any. So I'm like, nope, they're not in yet, and the cars drive by and then I start whaling. I remember telling my kids, I'm like, hey, reel up or cast in a spot where we're not going to catch them. And then you start talking to people and like, are they biting yet? No, not biting. Oh yeah, it's a little cold. And they take off and then you cast right back in there and it's like one after another. My kids, when COVID hit, that's what we did. We went ditch fishing. I had to keep them occupied, because they couldn't go see their friends. We were doing stuff as a family. So we went shed hunting, then it was turkey hunting, and then we went ditch fishing like every day. They did the like e-learning deal. And then as soon as that was over, we would go ditch fishing. And me and my son really started exploring new spots. And I see it now in him where that really piqued a lot of like, thought bubbles for him as a teenager, because spots that he had maybe driven by his whole life that didn't realize there's that many fish in the shallows there, that now he tries those spots all the time. And he's always looking up lakes like on his Onyx fish map where he's like, oh, that would be a good spot. It's all public ground right up next to where you can fish there. Or that ditch has access to the lake and it's Minnesota public property. So he, that really for him, because, he's a teenager, he doesn't have boats and
Exactly.
he needs to find spots where he can drive to and have a good time doing it. And you as an angler, the listeners out there are so many areas that you can access that are public property or parks or whatever, where you have shallow water bays. It's amazing how many of these fish will pile in there if you get 1 or 2 or 3 warm days after ice out.
Yep. It's a great opportunity in the next couple months here for people who don't have a boat or aren't able to get out on the water to be able to, catch these fish consistently.
100%. And it's affordable. I almost always keep a rod in my truck, being down at Round Share Productions at the office, the studio, talking to Travis Frank, he does the same thing. I know a lot of my buddies do the same thing. I always have a crappie rod rigged up in the spring with some tackle. Might even keep a little tub of wax worms in case the bluegills are sliding in. Sometimes they're a little finicky, so I don't tend to use live bait very much, but in the spring I will tip it sometimes with a wax worm or even a small maggot or something. But I keep that stuff in my truck everywhere I go, because there's times where I'll be driving around where it's sort of out of my, let's say, circle of where I fish, which would be, from home over to Aiken, Brainerd, Cross Lake, Longville, kind of that realm where I'm outside that bubble a little bit, maybe down towards St. Cloud or driving down towards the cities. Like this time of year, a lot of times I'll have seminars or rigging up my boat or whatever's going on. I'm driving down towards Twin City. I see people fishing certain spots that I want to try. It's amazing because it's crazy on some of these ditch spots how many fish will pack into those areas where you're catching crappies, bluegills, bass. I mean, it's nuts. We just talked about Lake Minnetonka, how busy it is. Well, it's such a big lake that some of these harbors are packed full of fish, and there's really not that many people in there. But to see how many thousands of fish are in there with your electronics, I think of that a lot when I'm driving by these spots, and that's why I'm always rigged up, ready to go. I want to touch on a few more just little topics that we touched on throughout the podcast, and then we can end this. We can go eat. We need to rig rods for tomorrow. We need to get your boat plugged in. But I want to talk about sturgeon fishing for me, because you said you wanted to do it. I've done it a lot on the Rainy River. I've enjoyed it a lot. My friend Mike Zimmerman's brought me up here. They've had a place here for years, and they were into sturgeon fishing before, I would say, the popularity of it caught on. And sturgeon fishing is really economical. It's something that anybody can do. If you don't have a ton of electronics, you can come up to the Rainy River and be successful catching sturgeon. What you need are some big flat weights. I like those flat weights. They don't seem to spin in the current. Some people use like an egg sinker or something. I like those flat weights like we saw guys using today. Then just putting like I'll generally put a large bead, a big swivel, and then a bigger sized hook, like a 2 or a 3/0 hook. And you can just gob night crawlers on there. You can put salted shiners on there. We saw guys today putting half a shiner with a lob of night crawlers on their hooks. That's very popular. And then using like a 50 to an 80 pound braid is pretty typical. And then just using like a heavier bait casting rod. Some people use musky rods. Some people use salmon rods. Some people use downrigging rods. There's different types of rods that people like using. Just something heavy enough where you can move those fish. Because what you don't realize about sturgeon is you can crank your drag down as tight as you possibly can, where you can't even hand tighten it anymore. And when you get one of those fish on, when it decides to move in the current, it will pull line out. I mean, they have so much power. And that's what's fun about sturgeon fishing. My recommendation for people with sturgeon fishing, another couple weeks here, like after the walleyes close, once it starts to warm up, once 4 Mile Bay goes out and those gaps starting to open up, those sturgeon pile in here like crazy. And that's what's kind of the funnest time period to me. It's starting to warm up a little bit more, and it's fun. It's a fun opportunity for kids as well, to get kids up here. You literally just put the rods in the rod holder or hang on to it, and you're dropping that weight down to the bottom. It's super easy fishing. You don't have to really do anything finessey whatsoever. You can spot lock the trolling motor. You can throw the anchor out. You sit in those deeper holes or on those edges. And when those sturgeon are coming through on Lake of the Woods on the Rainy River, I don't know of a better sturgeon bite other than the Columbia River, which those are white sturgeon, right? That this system is so chock full of sturgeon, it's unbelievable. And it's super fun to do. It's super simple. Like we said, it's a great time to get the family out or just some buddies together to go experience catching those big fish, regardless if you buy the tag or not. I highly recommend throwing them back. We've kept them over the years and smoked them, and they're fine. People like doing that. That's great. But you don't have to catch and keep one to have a good time. We've had days where we've caught countless amounts of sturgeon, and we've had other days where we just caught a handful, but they're all giants, so it is a fun time of year. It's something to do before opener. Usually the lodging around Lake of the Woods is really reasonable that time of year. You can get a cabin for dirt cheap, come up, have a great time with buddies, and it's just another springtime little check mark that you can do.
Yep. One of my fondest memories growing up, I still remember it. Me and my dad went out here for our first time, and we're going to come up here and do the sturgeon thing. We'd never done it. We'd heard about it. And like you said, it's super ergonomical. We had some rods and we put some heavy line on it. And that is one thing. You don't want to come out here and fish them with a walleye rod, because it's hard on them fish to have a 2-hour battle trying to get them in. It's not good for the fish, right? So make sure you have, equipment that's adequate to catching them fish,
Conducive.
Yeah. And but it is just so easy. You don't really need to know what you're doing. You literally get in them spots, deep holes, and you'll see where the boats are if you don't know where to go. But it's just so easy, and it is so fun fighting fish that big with that much power. It's something that is just awesome to do, and it's something to get out and do before you can be out walleye fishing.
And they're dinosaurs. They're so cool looking. They're just neat. We saw some today on forward facing sonar. You could see them. You can't, you can't miss them. You see them on side imaging. You see them on forward facing sonar. I would say they're starting to trickle in like the walleyes, but like the walleyes, I don't think we've hit that peak bite window yet. And I would say in the next week or two, sturgeon anglers are going to want to get up here and experience it. If you've never done it before, this is the window that you're going to want to do it, the time frame that you're going to want to do it. It's a super fun bite. So, Nick, I appreciate being on the podcast like always. You're always good about jumping on with me. Appreciate you dragging me up here in your boat. I don't have a boat yet, so I have to like call my good buddies and like, hey, and get them excited about going fishing somewhere. So I con them into taking me fishing. And of course, Jake, I figured Jake would be on board. So if I could get Jake to go, I know he would bug Nick as well, and we could get up here and experience Rainy River. I love being here. Tonight, we'll go into the bar restaurant, have something to eat, re-rig some rods. Everything's soaked from the amount of snow. Hopefully it's not. It looks like tomorrow's going to be a little bit better as far as forecast. Less snow. The temperatures are only rising from here, so the bite should continue. If you are coming up to Rainy River, plan on dragging. Plan on bringing the plastics, bring the hair jigs, anything in that quarter, 3/8, half ounce. Bring some Crush City, bring some Largo shads. If you can find shiners or bait wherever you're at around the Twin Cities or wherever you're coming from in the state, as long as you're buying it in the state of Minnesota, grab the bait before you come up here. Because on the way up here, I mean, we hit several places on the way around Leech, all over. Nobody has bait because, you know what, it's the down season, right? It's the downtime. That people have some fatheads. If you can get some rainbow minnows, if you can get some sucker minnows. Otherwise, if you are going to plan on fishing up here and you plan on fishing the Canadian side, get your Canadian license, just fish the plastics. You're going to catch them. They were womping the plastics pretty good. I wouldn't say the bait is quite that essential. The plastics and the hair jigs are more important. But if you can find some bigger minnows, it's always nice to have that in your back pocket. We did see the helicopter. I don't know if any of you have been following that on social media. The helicopter was ripping up and down the river. He didn't stop and hover over us, but I did take a couple little videos of him. So it was kind of interesting to see. But spring is here. The Rainy River bite is here. The fish are going. We're catching fish. What a great opportunity. So hopefully Nick and I on this podcast help you get dialed in on the Rainy River bite. Good luck to everybody. Until next week, I'm Tony Roach. This has been the Dialed In Angling Podcast.